Here. Great to have you joining us this week as we continue on with another 10 minutes of morning calm. And this week we're doing it a little bit differently. We have a service coming up on Sunday that's looking at this mantra, always with wonder. And we're going to be looking at 5 questions that Jesus asks as part of that, as a small part of the service. But I'm using this week to look at each one of those 5 questions, kind of building towards Sunday. So today's question is a fascinating one, and it's again this beautiful little twist. And it comes right after the question we looked at yesterday, which is, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? That idea that God is actually never counting. It's not this transactional. It's not where we're supposed to always be thinking sort of equations of love, who loves us, who doesn't, who's on the good side, who's on the bad side. I mean, that's not to say we don't need to be prudent, because we do, but it's to say just get out of the scorekeeping mentality. I think that's what the call is from God there. And today is an equally fascinating one. And this is from Matthew 5, verse 47. If you greet only your brothers or sisters, what are you doing more than others? Beautiful. So there's a number of parts that really struck me looking at that. Here's Jesus saying, look, if you just go around saying hi to just the people who are your relatives, if we only greet them, our circle actually gets pretty small. And imagine someone who really only does that. If we only greeted those who are familial to us. And there's a limit there, because I think the big picture, and this is something I've been playing around with for the past couple weeks, is God eventually wants us to get to the point where we see everything in everything. And that's a big place to be. And I don't think we get there too often. And yet when we do, it can be a really transformative thing where we all of a sudden start to see everything in everything. And we're no longer just confining it to these small circles. Now, again, if you notice this, Jesus is not saying don't greet your brothers and sisters. He's not saying family is a bad thing. None of that. Our binary minds tend to think of it that way. He's saying, look, if that's all you do, you're kind of missing it. So he's saying do that, but then it's also this underneath that question is this beautiful call to just keep bumping the circle out. So we start to see everything in everything. And that, I believe, is one of the more beautiful parts of growing older, is I think that becomes much easier to start to see everything in everything. And what would that look like? Well, I wanted to read for you today. This is a selection from one of my favorites. Many of you have heard me quote him before. Many of you have read him, Thomas Merton. And this is Thomas Merton's famous experience at 4th and Walnut. And it's where just for a nanosecond, it bumps out for him. Just for a nanosecond, he goes from a world that's like this to a world that's like this, to a world where you see everything and everything, or everyone and everyone, however you want to phrase that. A beautiful, beautiful line here. And this was life transformative for him. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people and that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I love that. God's marker is very often joy. I have the immense joy of being man, a member of a race in which God himself became incarnate. And if the sorrows and the stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now I realize what we all are. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. That's a very, very famous line, very famous quote. Probably many of you have heard it before, but it's incredibly powerful and beautiful, because here he is just in this normal moment, 4th and Walnut, Louisville, Kentucky. He's just at this corner of this street, all these people running around. And all of a sudden he has this moment of seeing everything and everything, seeing all these connections. I think that's so much what God's call is with this, with these kinds of questions, this constantly trying to bump things out as best we can. It's not necessarily easy to do, and I think those moments probably sneak up on us more than we can create them. I don't think any of us can go out and hang on a street corner and say, "Okay, time for me to see everything and everything." I think they sneak up on us, and when they do, please note that that's a breath of the divine. Please note that that's how God's really working. And the best way to experience it is not to go through a bunch of steps to get you there. The best way to experience is just to breathe, just be at peace, just learn to be. And I love this phrase, even though we don't use it much in the Christian New Church. I find it a very beautiful Christian phrase. Just be a Christian witness. That idea of witnessing to these things. Witnessing means we just observe them and they're all there. It's just this matter of, are we awake to it or not? And that once we are, folks, boy, that's such a beautiful place. And I'm sure we could go through a list here of people having experienced that, because I think that is so much the part, at least for me, where I find faith. I'm not really interested in arguing beliefs with people. I say that a lot, but it's true. I just have no interest in that. But these experiences to me speak of the transcendence. They speak of the divine. They speak of God among us. They speak of something way beyond what my little consciousness can ever hold. And they speak to me actually of what's ultimately real. And I imagine they do the exact same thing for you. So, folks, that's the thought. That's the hot thought for today. May you have, your little street corner moment today where you just maybe for a second still your mind enough and just very gently whisper the words, everything in everything, and just see what comes to your heart in that moment. So that's the thought, dear friends. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little meditation. We're going to do a little prayer, and then we'll look at comments on New Church Live's Facebook page. If you care to leave a comment, I'll be reading those out loud if you're joining us for the first time. And as well, as always, you can leave comments later on in the week, and I will I'll respond if I can get to it. So with that, friends, let's get a little breath. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I. Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and. Be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, dear friends, let's get a little cheery hello to everyone. All right. I need to reload that page. And I love that, Thomas Merton, well worthwhile taking some time to read. I mean, his language, folks, is a little dated sometimes because he was writing in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But again, brilliant, brilliant author, and has quite the beautiful spiritual story. All right, so let's take a look here. Sue, good morning to you, and hope you're doing well. Linda, my dear friend, hope you're doing well. Good morning. Sherry, good morning. I like the little fall leaves, this morning busting out. The hoodie feels very fall-like for me. I don't know what your fall uniform is, but mine always feels like a hoodie. Marcus, good morning to you, buddy, and I hope you're doing well. Patricia, great to see you joining us this morning. Sue writes, Richard Rohr writes in The Universal Christ about a woman who had a similar experience to Merton when she was on the subway, and suddenly she sees the Christ in everyone. Incredible. Yeah, and the beautiful part of it is I think life, like if we have just one or two of those moments, they really are life changing, and we don't go back from that. And it's easy to want to capture and stay in that. Seems like God's plan on this side of life, not in heaven, is for us to just get those experiences just to remind us of his presence. Paige writes, shining like the sun. So true. Oh, Mary busting out a Greg Boyle quote. Greg Boyle's also phenomenal. We are sent to the margins not to make a difference, but so that the folks on the margins will make us different. And boy, that is so true, Mary. And isn't it interesting, right? That we have that moment of universality. We have that moment of connectedness, and it's no longer the hierarchy of things. And then we're just as likely to be, as you noted there, we're just as likely to be made different as anything when we're out there on the margins. Really well said. Sherry writes, thank you. Have a grand day. And so good to hear you joining us, and wishing you a grand day as well, Sherry. Betty writes, good morning. So good to hear God is not counting. And if so, I hope he's not weighing it against me. I know I struggle to see the good with events in this week, but there's so much disregard of human life. Praying for all our friends in Florida. Take care, friends. Yeah, it is. And it doesn't, and I say this a lot, but I think it's really important to keep on reminding ourselves, like the spiritual journey is not one, and you folks all know this, like we all know this, right? The spiritual journey is not one, sadly, where we get to avoid heartache. The spiritual journey is when we're actually, our hearts will start to break even more. And because we're just open to it, when you're connected to all those people, you're connected to all their joy, and you're connected to all their pain as well. The word for that connection with people's pain or their suffering literally is the word compassion. Means with suffering. We're able to be with people in their suffering. And it's interesting, Betty, because underneath that all, I continue to be amazed by how, like, there's this drumbeat of connectedness and joy, even in the midst of that suffering, which is pretty interesting. So with all that, friends, we do want to join together in prayer for Florida over the next few days, and I'm sure we'll have some news come tomorrow morning. And just wishing you folks all the best. May you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Take care. Bye bye.